So today we're offering a lunch and learn in partnership with ChildFriendly, which is an amazing resource for childcare operators, especially in Alberta. A childcare software that has been designed by a childcare operator and fellow ACE member, which is always a great thing. Um, and we're going to talk about inclusive environments, inclusive play, and the Inclusive Spaces Grant for Alberta, which is set to reopen hopefully tomorrow, but very soon in May. Um, Very grateful today to have Tim here from Park and Play, who's an inclusive play specialist, and going to talk a little bit about what Park and Play can offer, but also just a bit about how important it is to have inclusive spaces in your daycare or childcare setting. So with that, we can jump right in. Tim, you're first. So I'm happy to stop sharing my screen whenever you want, if you
Yep,
have a presentation or.
I do. I've got a
Okay,
presentation. I hopefully ready to go here.
sure.
All right. Are you seeing it now?
Yep, I can see it. Looks great.
All right. So thank you very much for having me today. As Crystal said, I am Tim Ellsworth with Park and Play Design. I am a certified inclusive playground design educator, which just means I teach municipalities, landscape architects, any group really interested in designing inclusive play spaces. I do offer continuing education units as well to those organizations. So that's why they see it as valuable and just learning more about building inclusive spaces. Inclusion, and what does it mean? There are so many different words that are used and thrown around these days. Accessibility versus inclusion, equitable play, parallel play, all of these things, they are all part of a larger puzzle that do not mean the same thing. And so I know that as childcare operators, you are applying for grants, such as the grant opening up here in the next few weeks. It's just important to understand these terms in order to help you secure that kind of funding. So that's one of the main reasons that I like to have these talks with childcare operators, is just learning the terminology so that when you're applying for these grants, when you're talking to donors, anybody, that you're really armed with the correct terminology and words in order to access that money and show that you are building a more inclusive space. So when we talk about the terminology, you can have an accessible space that is not inclusive. You cannot have an inclusive space that is not accessible. So accessible just means that we are giving people access to the site, that they can get into the area and move around. Inclusion means that once they're in that space and they can move around, there are activities for them to do that are similar or equal to all the other activities for any other child to do, regardless of ability. So that's sort of the main difference that we are really talking about here. And we want to make sure that when we talk about inclusive design, accessibility is just a part of it. And we're going to talk about all the rest of the components. Children with disabilities, we focus on this. We tend to focus on, the disabilities that we can see. So those would be children with mobility challenges, most common. That is a very small percentage of the children with disabilities in Canada. 95% of the children with disabilities in Canada have a cognitive disability. Only 34% have a physical disability, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be full mobility challenges. 22% have sensory, 43% have communication disabilities. So, and you can see that these numbers don't add up to 100% because when a child has a disability, they tend to have a disability that covers more than one segment of their being. So when we design play spaces, we were trying to design play spaces that are inclusive by dealing with all 5 elements of the whole child. So we are trying to make sure that we have physical play for all children. So typical ability children, and then children of differing abilities. We still want them to have physical activities that they can participate in. Social emotional play spaces. So we want to make sure that they are able to interact, participate in cooperation, build self-confidence. We also want to make sure that we have sensory play. So we want to make sure that we're touching on all of their sight, touch, smell, hearing, taste, and then vestibular and proprioception. Well, that's a big word for me. That just means that we want them to be able to learn about how their body moves in space. So again, just opportunities for movement, not just not just creative play or panels and things like that. Cognitive, we want them to have problem solving games, ways that they can challenge themselves mentally. And then communication, we want to develop a play space that offers them chances to express themselves and also encourages them to express themselves. So when we're talking about physical play, this is the easiest one. And this is kind of what playgrounds are always designed for. They always include some physical play. There's lots of climbing. There's, being able to go down a slide. There's monkey bars. There's climbing walls. We do want to make sure that when we're building these spaces, we have beginning, intermediate, and advanced level play. So climbers are the best example of this. We want to make sure that there is easy climbers. We want to make sure that there is a more challenging climber. For your users, we tend to not get into advanced climbing challenges, but on all play events, we want to make sure that there's a variety of levels of challenge in these events. So even when it comes to sliding, are there slides of different heights? Just are there different play events for different skill levels? That's the main thing that we want to focus on when we're addressing physical challenge, because the children, especially your users, are going to be 18 months old, and they need very, very simple, basic opportunities for play, for physical play. But then you're also going to have 5-year-old children who require a lot of challenge. 5-year-old children can do just about any sort of advanced climbing level. Social emotional, this tends to be something that's overlooked a lot. We want to make sure that we have creative and dramatic play areas. We want to make sure that there's opportunities to socialize, and we want to encourage socialization. We want to know that there is events that create an atmosphere of acceptance and respect. And we want to encourage creativity and imagination. So this is something that I find you daycare operators really excel in. The rest of the play space world sort of falls behind in this regard, but this tends to be a focus for you folks already. You tend to have a lot of dramatic play elements and social play elements and those sorts of things already. Sensory play. We want to make sure that there's a lot of different multi-sensory cues. We want to have quiet, cozy spaces for children that need some sensory relief. This is quite common, especially for children on the spectrum, that they sometimes need a cozy spot where they can get away from all the noise and activity and racket. So we like to include those in our play spaces as much as we can. And different sorts of materials. Some material, sometimes we use wooden areas just so that there's something different to touch, some different textures. You want to have things that create sounds, things that they can make sounds with, all different sort of textures, things for them to touch that, different sounds, different textures, different everything that will relate to them for a sensory, some sort of sensory stimulation, different colors to create different areas. We really just want to make sure that we're appealing to a lot of their different sensory, their senses, without it being overstimulating. So in particular for children that need that sort of less sensory stimulation, we don't want to overstimulate them, but we want to make sure that there's options for every child. Cognitive challenges. We want to have activities that appeal to a variety of interests. So, and we also want to, give them an opportunity to showcase what they've learned. So for some children, it'll be that they've learned their alphabet. For some children, it will be learning some numbers or some math. For other children, it could be a challenge. It could be a puzzle game where they have to manipulate and move pieces to solve a puzzle in some way or to play a game. Something that challenges them mentally and also gives them an opportunity to feel a sense of accomplishment. So we always want to make sure that we're including these in an inclusive play space for all children of all differing abilities. Communication, like I said, we want to give them an opportunity to communicate. We also want to encourage communication. Music activities are the most common way to allow children to contribute to the sounds of the play environment. And we find that music is the most inclusive element for any play space because it's usable by all abilities, all ages. So music is a great way to do it. We also just want to have interactive games and talk tubes and panels that encourage communication. We want to have elements that enable children to demonstrate an understanding of their communication process. So anything that encourages them to, again, talk about their sense of accomplishment in communicating is a great addition to any play space. These communication panels are becoming incredibly popular. Some municipalities are even mandating that they be in all play spaces now. It just gives children who are nonverbal an opportunity to communicate just using their fingers to point. They can spell, they can point at what it is that they want or need at that moment if they're nonverbal. So these are becoming very, very common. So next we're going to go into some sort of how do we put all of this into practice? What are some examples that we can do for a play space that make it more inclusive? This is literally a photo at a daycare that I took recently. So this was the structure that this daycare had. We can see it's a couple ladders up to a slide, or stairs, 2 sets of stairs up to a slide, and that's it. And so something like this was common in older childcare facilities, but this is literally still in place right now. We're just tearing it out here in the next while. Here's one a little more recent. So this is another structure in a childcare facility that I recently took a photo of. We can see the sort of climbing and activities on it, but then we look at something like this. This is a more modern, inclusive play set where we've got lots of sensory play built into it. We still have climbing, we still have sliding, but we have things that encourage manipulation. There's tactile play, there's sensory play, while still having climbing, sliding, social play, all of those things. So you can see how far the structures have come from the older structures in terms of being more inclusive and really encouraging different types of play. Here's a traditional climber, probably a little taller than most of your users would have. But now we're building climbers like this, which are specifically designed for children with mobility challenges to be able to climb up inside and then participate not only in the climbing, but also in sensory play built right into the climber. So there's different ways. It's not just a climber anymore. It's an opportunity for climbing and social play and sensory play all in one. A traditional spring toy like we've all seen a million times, very common, but not very usable by children who might have some physical limitations, versus a new sort of spring rider like this that allows a child to lay right on it and be held in place safely and securely so they can rock with their friends regardless of their physical abilities. The old school merry-go-round, this is not something that we see in a lot of daycares, but this is just as an example. This is a daycare, not very usable by a wide variety of users, versus the modern merry-go-round where you can roll a wheelchair or a mobility device directly onto the merry-go-round and participate with your friends. So these are just some examples of modern interpretations of play equipment that make them more usable by a wider range of users, and therefore much, much more inclusive. And we're almost at exactly 15 minutes.
That's
So
perfect. Perfect timing. Thank you.
any questions?
I'm just going to open the floor up before we move on to the second half of this for Tim to answer questions. You can turn your camera and microphone on if you'd like, or use the chat. I know one of the things that always stands out for me when I see your presentations, Tim, is that even though like some of those things may not be traditional daycare equipment, especially the climber, I think like how easy it would be just to add something like that. Even if you don't have children with mobility issues, it works for the age groups. Just you can use it for all of your age groups in your center, right?
That's one of the reasons I really like that climber. It's
Yeah,
really, it is usable. A 2-year-old can climb up inside it and they're perfectly safe.
exactly. And then you have it on site, right? If you ever have children that need it in different age groups. But um, yeah, just if anybody has any questions, now would be a great time. We'll also come back at the end too for more questions.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm
Well,
just
that's
gonna.
fine. I am always available. I know that for you folks, for you users, operators, this is an opportunity for you to access some more funding to make your spaces more inclusive and more
Mhm.
usable by more children. So I'm always available to help, to answer any questions. Park and Play also does have other representatives across the country. So no matter where you are, we're happy to have someone visit your site and share with you some ideas on how you can make your space more inclusive and access more of this funding. So anytime you have any questions, you can always reach out to us.
Thank you so much. I know, like for myself, we utilized Tim and his team for the last round of the Inclusive Spaces grant in Alberta, and it was by far the best and easiest process in that grant, and the funding absolutely it fits what you offer. And we had no pushback from the government using your services and the outdoor equipment for the centers that I worked with on that grant. And I think there was like 18 or 20 of them that I know that you were in touch with. So I'll move on and we'll just quickly do a bit of a brief overview on the Inclusive Spaces grant, because this is something that is opening, I think tomorrow, but it could be any time at this next little bit of May. And I really wanted to make sure that operators had access to understanding this grant program, and hopefully, give some consideration to how you can utilize it in your center, because it's definitely a really amazing opportunity, and it's open to the for-profit and nonprofit sectors together. So that's always a bonus. Um, so a little bit of an overview on this grant program. It was open, I believe it was in January of this year, for a short time. It's now, like I said, about to reopen, hopefully tomorrow or shortly. It's a provincially funded program for up to $15 million. It is a competitive grant process. So for any of you that applied for the original space creation grant, this is a different structure on how they evaluate your applications and how they allocate the funding. It's also a project-based program. So you will be funded based on the resource package, the capital project, whatever you put forward with your application is how you get funded. It's not funded based on spaces or anything like that. And the purpose of this program really is to provide support to existing childcare centers, to make them more inclusive, more accessible, and improve the quality of those spaces for all children. So here's just a little bit about who's eligible, and the priorities of the communities for this program. So you do have to be an existing license holder to apply for this program. It's open to nonprofit, private, for-profit, facility-based daycares and preschool programs. It's also open to day home agencies. Unfortunately, not directly to the day home educators to apply for this. It is through the agency, and it's not available to the out-of-school programs. You can apply for it if you have an out-of-school program that's in a daycare, but you can't use this money for school-age children or the programs that they attend in an out-of-school care license. Some of the key eligibility requirements, you do have to complete this quite quickly, 6 to 12 months from when you sign your grant agreement. The costs, like I mentioned before, are directly linked to whatever your project is that you submit with your application. So you will be funded, based on exactly those estimates, those quotes, and whatever resource list you provide. You can have some professional services included in this, administration mostly of the project, to a max of 10% or $5,000, I think, whichever is less of the project budget. And you do need to provide a very specific budget and justification for your project as part of this application. So the communities, this is kind of the focus of the grant, and part of the application previously was around support for how you would provide more inclusive, accessible care for these specific communities. So it isn't based on your location, like the space creation or the building blocks grant, or the need in that area for childcare spaces. It's based around how you would support low-income families, Indigenous families, lone parent families, underserved communities, families of children with disabilities, families needing care outside of standard hours. So if you're in a community where there's a lot of shift work, maybe more, parents are not working those traditional 9 to 5 kind of hours. As long as you are hitting on at least one of these categories, you are eligible to apply for this program. Just keep in mind that you do need to support how you are in this community, how many families you might serve in this community, and what the need for these communities would be that you're meeting in your center. So a little bit of just some tips and kind of tricks to get you through if you are applying for this program. So you do really need to make sure that like any grant program, that your application is directly in line with the objectives of this program, which are around inclusion, around accessibility. You do need to provide very detailed rationale and expected outcomes. So how will these improvements that you're asking for, whether it's like a resource package or a playground through TIM, how is that going to directly relate to supporting one of those communities, at least one of those communities, and what is the projected outcome of the government funding that in your center? You do need to have a timeline, achievable timelines and milestones on, your project, and when you will start it, what kind of the timeline will look like for it. You do need to also have a very accurate budget. I would say that you want to make sure that you're using quality vendors in this. I would suggest that, an IKEA cart attached to your application would not set it up for success. The government is looking for this to be, highly inclusive, accessible, and quality products that they're funding. And define like how you're going to evaluate these supports that you're putting into your program. How will you know if they're being successful in the future and long-term for the families in your community? Some of the things that we saw as far as applications maybe not being successful in the first round of this program were things that were not directly related to the goals of this program around inclusion. You can do some, repairs, renovations, construction under this program. You can, some people had success putting forward some new flooring, maybe changing some of the layout in their center to make sure that it is more accessible, but this is not the same as a space creation program. It's not going to fund infrastructure or expansion or construction. You do need to have legitimate construction and contractor estimates attached to this if you're applying for any kind of capital projects. And you also need to be kind of aware, and I'm hoping there might be some changes around this, but as it stands right now, it does not include any GST on these resources. which is a bit of a gap for us. So we have to be mindful of that when you're kind of budgeting for this. It also is paid out for the majority of people. It was paid out in kind of installments. So you would receive 50% of your project when you signed your grant agreement, and the remaining 50% would come after your last reporting. So that can put people in a bit of a situation if you don't have access to that funding or that kind of cash flow to ensure that you can finish the project. So just something to be aware of. And I can absolutely help support people if you are wanting more information on the application and how we can help you with that financial portion, to make sure that you can complete the project if you don't necessarily have that 50% capital available as well. So I want to just touch on a little bit about outside of the grant, and I'm happy to answer questions about the grant at the end, but how just some little things that you can do in your center. And we do have Wayne here today from ChildFriendly for specific questions around their software and what the program can do to make sure, you know, you are providing kind of inclusion in your center and making sure you're tracking those needs of each of your children that you care for. So one of the things, you know, with most softwares, but ChildFriendly directly, a feature that they offer is a journal feature, which allows you to make sure that you are making observations. It really streamlines those observations for your staff. We know that any kind of extra admin and paperwork really does take away from the care and, you know, your attention to children. So making it as easy as possible for you and your staff to track those observations, to make enhancements and changes to your program to make sure that you are supporting those individual needs of all the children and their development in your center. One of the things around a software journal, like you see with ChildFriendly, is it does help you to communicate with parents. It helps you, again, to make sure that you're modifying things to include all children in activities and adjust any kind of programming that you have in your center to really include everyone that's there, make it as accessible as possible, helps you to track each child's progress, again, to identify early supports and bring in those things, maybe look at the children that you have in care right now, and as you're planning to maybe provide some application for this inclusive grant, you might start to kind of go back through those observations and see what kind of resources you can bring in that really do support the children that you have, whether it's, you know, a different kind of climber or something outside, or maybe some sensory equipment inside your center, or even like a ramp or accessible washrooms, if you're going to do a bit of more modifications. But yeah, it's, I think, just a full scope of looking at your program, reevaluating it and kind of seeing it through the eyes of the little people that are there and finding a way that you can really support all of their needs. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for our kind of quick lunch and learn on inclusion and inclusive spaces. There's obviously some resources available through the Alberta government. They do have a page specific to the inclusive spaces program that's coming. That is the direct link right there. I also am here on behalf of ACE, but also on behalf of my own company that I offer grant writing through, and I'm happy to support you in any questions you have or more detailed information on how we can set you up for success if you do want to apply for this program. And again, Wayne is here available, and you know, if you haven't looked at ChildFriendly for your center, I would suggest you would take a look at their link, book a demo, and just see how easy it can make some of your admin and your life as an operator. And we do offer lunch and learns every other week. So we will be back again in 2 weeks to talk about financial reporting and audits, which is always thrilling in childcare. But with that, I'm going to just open the floor for questions, for any comments, if anybody has anything they want to bring up before we send you on your way for the rest of the afternoon. Wayne, is there anything else that with ChildFriendly that I missed that you might want to just say? Or
no, it's definitely great. Yeah, yeah, our platform definitely provides a lot of opportunity for you to digitize your operations and make sure that you stay fully compliant with the regulatory changes. Thanks so much, guys. And yeah, for sure, any questions, feel free to ask yeah, just unmute. You can unmute your mic, I believe.
Mhm.
And
We also, have the chat and the question and answer feature too, if you don't feel comfortable asking it live. Is there anyone here that applied for the Inclusive Spaces grant the first time earlier this year? Anybody who's applying or planning on applying for this next round once it opens? Hi, Anna. Did you have a question? Do you want to turn you're welcome to turn your mic on.
Yes, hi. I did apply for the first round and I was not approved, but I don't know if it was because I submitted it like on the last day at 12 o'clock or if it was just my grant application that wasn't approved. And in my program, I don't have a lot of children that have physical disabilities or physical needs and require the support. And we're an open floor center. So I was more, because I'm in Brooks, I was more applying for the underserved communities and the racialized families and the multicultural part of it. And yeah, so I wasn't approved. And so I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting because
That's okay.
licensing was here. And so I'm like, oh, I'm trying to get to
Oh.
the meeting. But anyway, so I apologize for that. So I'm wondering, do you know the percentages of programs that apply just for the multicultural and racialized families and those types of grants that were approved on that part of it?
I don't have like government stats on that. I can just give like my own personal experience. For myself, we worked on 22 applications for this program, and 20 of them were approved. The two that weren't were in active kind of early stages of their space creation program with the space creation grant. So I mean, they didn't really give a clear like explanation for why, but I was kind of led to believe that it was because of where they stood with the space creation grant and that they hadn't quite, sorry, hadn't quite got far enough in that program to be eligible for this. As far as like resource packages for like underserved communities and different kind of cultural things, we did a lot of those kind of packages with the grants that I worked on, and they were successful. So I'm not really sure. Did you provide like a full resource list with your application?
Yes, I did. I did a resource list and I priced it out, and then I did the time frame on it
Yeah.
as well. And then I also did like how we would evaluate the success of the resources that we would be
Yeah.
able to access. And then they just responded that I should reapply in May and to review like the criteria. And I'm like,
Okay.
okay.
Great.
So I wasn't clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to look it over. Like if you want to if you're comfortable and you want to reach out to me personally, and send it through, I'm more than happy to like look it over before you resubmit it, just to see if there's anything that catches my eye as like a red flag or maybe something that you might want to strengthen. I'm happy to help you with that. Just send me an email or message me if you want. But yeah, I know it's a competitive program too. So I know it shouldn't have mattered that you sent it on like the last minute that the program was open. They're supposed to have all of the applications kind of together and evaluate it and then fund it based on like the strongest application down. So the timeline shouldn't matter. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to kind of talk to you privately and see if there's anything before you resubmit
Okay,
that I
thank
can
you.
help you with. Yeah, no problem. Is there anything else before we wrap up? Anybody have any questions for Tim around, your own program, how you can bring in a bit more of an inclusive kind of design for your playground if you're just looking at that, and how they can support you? Anything around the grant or just in general, we're happy to help. I'll just leave it open for a few more minutes and then we can let you go back to licensing inspections and all of the fun things that you deal with in childcare. on a Wednesday.
All right.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you,
Thank
Tim.
you. Bye, guys.